all this machine learning is dehumanizing a lot of our interactions. And I say that as an AI graduate, very passionate about AI. Machine learning, pandemic data is very much dehumanizing a lot of what we do, everything from the chatbot to the less personal interaction with people.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jody Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. This is the second part of my interview with Graham Brown. They're getting close. They are getting close. The AI voices are getting pretty near to being able to have an actual conversation. But I think that, I think ultimately people are going to understand that an AI voice isn't real and that a human voice is real. And they're not going to have a problem with dealing with an AI voice in certain circumstances. You know, we're just going to expect that that's what we'll hear. It won't be a real voice. That's fine. You know, just make it as pleasant as possible.
Yeah.
The machines are taking over. Yeah.
Well, you know, you could go to, I mean, think about it. You could, you know, if you were hungry, you could go to a vending machine and buy something from the machine, like a pack of chips or something, bag of chips. But you could also go to a $1,000 restaurant, right? So we're quite happy with that transactional part of it. It's not like, okay, AI is going to push us all into that vending machine experience, right?
Yeah.
People will also want the $1,000 where, you know, the chef comes out and they shows them all the food and the ingredients and where it came from and sourced and all that stuff. So we're going to
have an experience.
Yeah, exactly. And again, with the voices as well, you can mimic a voice, but you can't mimic a conversation. That's the difference, right? They're different. Like the voice is the transactional part, but the conversation is too much nuance in there, even in the language itself, to understand the nuances and the emotion and the assumed knowledge within a conversation, that you understand what the context is as well and how I'm reacting and how you're reacting. And if you know as well, like if you smile when you're talking, it comes out in the voice, right?
Sure, yeah.
All of that stuff. So that is extremely complex as a problem. Maybe in future, but right now, no.
Yeah. They are working on adding emotion to AI voices, but it's not variable. So you'll get like low, medium, high of this emotion, but like you'll have to program it so that it moves through the different parts of whatever is being said, and the variations of emotion are actually natural, because it's really hard for that to be natural. But this is kind of a debate that we've been having a lot in the voiceover world, because a lot of voice people are a little worried that AI voices are going to take their jobs. And I think in some cases, when it comes to certain bits of like the transactional stuff that you're talking about that right now have a human voice, you know, kiosks and stuff like that, maybe that will go away. You know, maybe the people who have the lower budget and don't want to spend money on an actual human voice and think it'll be, well, good enough is good enough, they aren't going to pay for a human voice. They'll go for an AI voice. And those low hanging jobs are kind of the first things that will go. We're kind of seeing, you know, like the jobs that people shop for on Fiverr, you know, kind of stuff. So yeah, that could probably go away. But I think what you're saying about the $1,000 dining experience is very valid, in that people are still going to want an experience. They're still going to want the people experiencing their brand to have an experience that they can relate to, as opposed to an AI voice. And I don't think that AI voices are, you know, I think that they'll get pretty close, but like CGI, I don't think they're going to be exact. And I think the more exact they get, the more creepy it's going to get.
Yeah, they're getting close.
They're getting close.
Even with CGI, right?
Yeah, they are.
The main developments in AI in this space, the ones to look out for, obviously we've seen a lot of advances in machine learning libraries in audio in the last few years. A lot of it's available now publicly. AWS has a bunch which you can use, quite low cost. The big game changers now are GPT-3, which is partly to do with Elon Musk's OpenAI project. And GPT-3 is far more advanced as a machine learning library than anything that's been out at the moment. And whilst I don't really know the implications for audio because it hasn't really been applied there, if you look at how it's writing content on the web now, the GPT-3 articles written by AI are really good. In fact,
Really?
they're so good. Unless you would actually probably look at it and think, in the same way, maybe you read an article by a non-native speaker and there might be a few words which just, that's not how that 1%.
Yep.
But you would have to be looking at it and looking for that, or you would have to be a native speaker who knew that kind of nuance doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
Then GPT-3 is at that level, which is 99%, which is amazing. And the interesting thing, Google are bringing out a new set of libraries called MUM, M-U-M, which are apparently 1,000 times more powerful than GPT-3. So
wow,
all the bets are off in terms of what they can do in voice. But to the point about voice, it's like, I think it's like art, where you talk about CGI, for example. You can give a paintbrush to a monkey or an elephant and they can knock out like a Jackson Pollock, right?
Yeah.
It like physically looks like a Jackson Pollock, like they just got splashed on. But they don't have the story of Jackson Pollock, right? And therefore, what creates the value is not the physical replication of something, because that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the stories we tell about these things. That, if you put a Jackson Pollock on your wall, you've also got a story. Look at Banksy, for example, like graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly it's worth $1 million. But it's just graffiti, right? I mean, your local governments would be coming in and cleaning that stuff off, right?
Yeah.
But now they're like putting perspex over it and protecting it and charging people $1 million for it. And that's the point, is it's the story that makes it valuable, not the ability to copy something. So if I can copy something's sound or somebody's sound, yeah, you're right. That low level group are going to get wiped out because it's transactional. They're the kiosks. But there'll be the guys at the top, they'll increase in value. They'll become more sought after because they're the ones that really remind us what it is to be human.
Yeah, I agree. There's also the underlying aspect of there's a life that he lived before he made that painting. And that's why he made the painting.
Yeah.
So, and you don't get that, again, you're not going to get that with voices. You're not going to get that with simulated video. You're not going to get that there's no previously lived life.
There's no vulnerability. There's no
exactly.
cracks.
Yeah. So I think that is an important part of what makes art something that...
it's all of it, surely.
Yeah.
Think about it in songs, right? Think of songs. I think like the top 5 best-selling songs ever, 4 of them have the word love in it and have some kind of loss in them. You look at it, I can't even remember. My mind's blank now, but if you think of a Beatles song, because everybody knows a Beatles song.
Oh, yeah.
And they all have loss in it, right? They've lost something.
Sure.
As you know, when somebody's playing that song or singing it to you, that they're singing from this position of pain. That we don't really like happy songs, do we? Like happy, everything's good. It's fun. It's kind of like being at the nursery. We like songs that say, yeah, you really feel my pain. You've been there too. You know what it feels like. And that's that story.
Yeah. It's important that we relate to each other as human beings. And so, that's what those songs do. On the idea of machine learning, though, the really interesting part is that there have been machines early on that have been given the information to try and write a hit song. And what they come up with is really kind of creepy.
K-pop.
It was more like a 50s torch song, actually. It was kind of odd. It was just this really strange sounding, it didn't actually say English words or words of any kind. It sort of said something, but they were the sounds of the words instead of the actual words. And
Yeah.
it was just, I have a podcast coming up about this. I did a
Oh, wow.
blog
That
on it,
sounds
and
great.
I linked to the video in the blog. It'll be really interesting to watch when it comes out. But it's, yeah, machine learning and music have
How
had,
did it make you feel when you heard it?
it made me feel a little bit of dread, actually.
Really?
And I can't really explain that.
That's not
that
what
emotion.
a song's supposed to do, is it?
No,
It's like the
really
opposite.
not.
It's anti-dread, isn't it? A song. It
But
should be like,
it should be, yes. But I think the reason that it affected me that way was because I was experiencing that song, understanding what a real song would sound like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and sort of seeing the mirror of what the computer thought it was really disconcerting.
Mm,
How, because it's machine learning, right? So you're experiencing what the machine thought we were doing. and without any meaning to it. So it was like this whole algorithm of what a hit song would be. So it had the the tonal changes, it had the chorus, it had the bridge, it had all of these things, but it didn't make sense. To my brain, it didn't make sense. It didn't have any presence. It wasn't it was a creation, but I didn't understand it, put it that way. It didn't make any sense to me. And understanding and sort of like trying to empathize with the thing that made this was really disconcerting.
yeah, that's the most important bit, isn't it? Because you can't empathize with the thing.
Yeah.
Because that thing never had a boyfriend that left him, her, never got rejected age 13, never worried about looking imperfect or being bullied at school and etc. Never had any of that. In any ways, the real scary part is if it does in the future, we are able to program that into it, that imperfection.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. I don't know where this is going, but
No.
it'll be interesting to see.
We might just come around in the beginning, like back to where we started. With machine learning, it becomes so good that it just mimics life in itself. So that's another podcast. But yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it definitely is. I know that we're all dealing with a lot of stuff these days, so I particularly wanted to acknowledge those that have taken the time to leave honest reviews of this podcast. Like Pamela Muldoon, who says, audio as part of your marketing strategy. I could not agree more with Jody's assessment that audio branding is the hidden gem of marketing. Now more than ever, how your brand sounds is becoming just as important as it looks and feels. The short, succinct episodes of this podcast, and I think she's referring to my solo episodes, are filled with nuggets, easy to listen to, that voice, thank you very much, and are perfect for binging. Nice work, Jody. Well, thank you, Pamela. It means a lot to me that you're getting some good information here. Thanks again for the review. And now, back to the show. Getting back a little bit to podcasting. So I understand just a little bit.
Yeah, did we go off course?
We did, but it was a good course. I liked the course. I have no problem with it.
That was the lane.
Yeah. It's the whole general conversation. We're getting there. So when you're talking about podcasting, do you have a reason that you want people to start podcasting? I mean, there's all sorts of information out in the world, and we've been talking about vulnerability and how people can reach an audience, and especially how large corporations can reach an audience and be vulnerable and all of that. Is there a couple of things that you would tell someone thinking of creating a podcast what they should be thinking about?
Yeah, certainly. I would say the first part is, who are you speaking to? Who is your audience? And I'm surprised, and I've done this as well, a lot of people start a podcast because they want to start a podcast. They don't think about who's going to listen to them. Now, there may be good enough reasons to do that. That I know enough people that start a podcast, they don't care if anybody listens to them. In fact, they're doing it really for themselves. And that is a noble enough reason to start a podcast. Absolutely.
Totally valid. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like writing a book for yourself or keeping a journal. Why not?
Or making a painting that no one will ever see. Who knows?
Exactly. Or creating a masterpiece of dinner and eating it on your own.
Yeah.
That's completely fine. So knowing your audience is really important though, because if you want to grow your podcast, if you want to do this for any business ROI, you need to know who you're speaking to. And one of the things radio hosts are really good at is they will always speak to you. They'll never speak to you guys or the audience. They'll always be you directly, and they're reaching out and talking to you. They've got a clear idea of who that person is. You know, there is somebody called Nicole. She's 42 years old. She's a communications manager in a large corporate. That's who I speak to on my podcasts. Speak to her because I understand her pain points. I understand her frustrations. And once you have the audience avatar, it really solves a lot of the problems that come out of podcasting. Like, what do I talk about? How do I grow this thing? Mm-hmm. So I would say that's probably the number one thing to define first is your ideal listener. Even get a picture, stick it on your microphone and look at it every time. Just remember that's who you're talking to.
Yeah, people do that in voiceover too.
Oh, they do?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
do you
if
have
you
a photo to stick on?
I don't have one photo,
Right.
but you definitely have a mind picture of the person that you're talking to when you're doing, when you're performing a script, because it's
That's
different
cool.
every time, right? But it's a conversation. The idea of how it sounds real is that you're answering a question from a particular person.
Right. So when you do a voiceover, you're actually talking to a person.
Yeah.
I never thought you'd do that. I thought you'd just be kind of reading the script.
It's a little more involved
not
than
an
that,
artist.
but yeah.
Yeah, no.
'Cause
That's just my misunderstanding.
I mean, that's why they call it acting, right? So
Right. There you
yeah.
go. Well, if you think
That's the
about it,
thing.
like, you know, when you've sat in a podcast and you feel like they've talked to you, you're
Yeah.
part of this conversation, you've actually felt part of it. That's the connection. And then there's also those podcasts where somebody's had an event or a Zoom meeting and they've just kind of taken the audio and stuffed it on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, these are conferences
Yeah.
and the panel sessions. The audio's bad, but you can tell they're not talking to you. They're talking to like this like mysterious object at the back of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no connection. You really feel that, even though all the content's the same. That's the difference between doing a podcast talking to somebody and just projecting your voice into the ether.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good distinction. So where do you think this is all headed? I mean, podcasting isn't going away.
No.
Are there other things that you think people will use it for in the future? Is there a bigger picture for podcasting in the future?
Oh, yeah, very much so. I think we're only getting started. Anybody that tells you that, oh, but everybody has a podcast now, as you're hearing, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
I heard that back in the day with
Yeah.
websites. So let's look at the numbers. There's 2.7 million podcasts in the world today. There's 2.7 million websites in the world in 1998. And for those of us that remember 1998,
Yes.
AOL
I had a site then.
you did? How
I
you
did.
make
I had
it
a
on?
site in 1995.
What did you make it on some notepad or something?
It was straight code. It was basically HTML.
There
It
you
was like,
go. Old
I don't know.
school.
I can't even remember how.
FTP.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember FTP. Yeah, totally. And really, the beginning of it was I put up a question. It was a songwriting resource, and so I put up a question. You know, how do you come up with your topics, or various different questions within the songwriting community, and then I just directed people there and asked them to answer their question by emailing me, and I would put up their question on this page.
Oh.
I would put up their answer. So it'd be like I called them songwriting surveys.
Mm.
And I kept them as a part of the larger site as the site got larger and HTML and websites and all of that developed and message boards and all of that. But it started from this one page of HTML in 1995.
Those are the best myths.
Yeah.
The origin myth. It started as a page. Wow, back in
Yeah.
1995.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? You think of like where we've come in websites. So we've gone from 2.7 million in 98 to 1.8 billion websites today.
And they're still
And even back
coming.
then, I imagine about that time, about 97, 98, when Windows 98 was out, 97, sorry. And then everybody felt like we were kind of getting to the mainstream with internet. You know, we've gone from your website, one page, to spinning GIFs and all that kind of thing going on then. It was getting, like Flash was coming out. Yeah, Flash.
Yeah.
That was a big Macromedia, all those guys. That was the big thing back then. Because I think that's the macro trend. If we look at, if we understand what podcasts really are, and we look at them in the context of websites. So websites really are a communication interface for business that, like in your context, it was a lot easier to do that than do it by mail, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, post in your questions to Jodie, and she will then type them out.
Yeah.
And then put them into the zine, whatever it was, right? The fanzine.
Oh, I remember those. I do.
That's how it was. It was just a much more effective way of doing that. And for businesses, you know, you don't need to go to the store to order something. You can see when they're open. You can phone them up just by doing the email. You don't need to go to the switchboard, etc. So it's much more effective. And podcasts do the same thing, but not for businesses, but for business leaders. They're a communication interface. If you think about how do business leaders communicate? Well, they communicate through PR, through conferences, through white papers. Look at those three things alone.
Yeah.
Nobody does those anymore. Like nobody does press releases, nobody does conferences, and nobody reads white papers anymore.
Yeah,
So
very
it's
true.
broken. So now look at that you could have one brand, and I feel in the future, one brand could have 100 podcasts. You know, look at a big consultancy like an SAP, for example. They could have thousands of podcasts, all their leaders on it. So that's how we're going to get to 2 billion, Jodie.
Yeah.
I believe it. We will have, like, everybody will have a podcast, like a resume, and every business leader will have a podcast because that will be for them their moniker of, they're not going to be doing conferences like they used to.
Yeah.
How are they going to meet people? How are they going to travel to the extent they used to?
Yeah. Well,
They'll
at least
come
they'll
back,
be
but not in the
hybrids. I think
Absolutely.
they're already doing the hybrids, right?
Well, people realize now that the genie's out of the bottle. It's like, I'm not going to fly to this place and waste 2 days for 1 hour.
Yeah.
That's all
yeah.
gone.
Well, meetings, business meetings that take an hour are a thing of the
You want a
of the
coffee?
past. Yeah.
Let's
Zoom.
do 15
We will
minutes
Zoom.
Just Zoom.
Do we need to have a meeting?
No, in many cases.
Yeah,
But that, again, it becomes that sort of polarization. You go from the transactional part, which is the 15 minutes meeting, to the $1,000 experience, which is I'm going to spend 3 hours with my friend or somebody I really care about.
Yeah, I mean, that's different. Yeah, that is a different experience. Yeah. But, if you're talking about business meetings where someone's flying across the country or across continents in order to have an hour meeting with someone who wants to sit across from a table at them but doesn't really know them.
Yeah. Go on Zoom.
Why? Yeah, go on Zoom. There is no
we'll
other
do a podcast
reason.
together.
Yeah.
That's where
do
we're
a
going.
podcast, yeah.
Do a podcast, yeah.
I love
Do it
it.
at scale. Yeah, absolutely. That's where we're going. And I think as well, like that's the one factor. And the other factor is that all this machine learning is dehumanizing a lot of our interactions. And I say that as an AI graduate, very passionate about AI. Machine learning, pandemic data is very much dehumanizing a lot of what we do. Everything from the chatbot to the less personal interaction with people. And therefore, we will seek out ways to connect with people. Again, going back to the beginning with those kids and the telephones. These disruptions we've experienced in our world have created barriers and walls around us. And the walls could be, for example, that I can't speak to somebody. I'm speaking to this bot pretending to be a human. Or I can't speak to somebody because we can't physically meet anymore because of restrictions or data. And these create walls, and therefore people will find ways around them. And that's why we're seeing social audio. And audio really is connection.
Very much so. Yeah.
It's about connecting with people. And that's why audio has a very, very good future. Because if anything, like globally, throughout time, we've always sought out better ways to connect with each other.
Are you looking for ways to improve your company's or podcast's impact? You'd be surprised how powerful the use of an intentional audio branding strategy can be. Want to know more? I have a free downloadable PDF that gives you my 5 tips for implementing an intentional audio strategy at voiceoversandvocals.com/audio-branding-strategy. That location does ask to put you on a mailing list, just to send you updates on when the new podcasts come out. But if you really don't want to give your email out, I understand. Just contact me directly. My email is all over my website, and I'll make sure you get that PDF without needing to sign up anywhere. If you do sign up, though, you also get access to a resources section called The Studio, where I have videos, white papers and PDFs, discounts from my guests, and snippets of audio from my guests that no one else gets to hear. So maybe it's worth your while. Totally up to you. And of course, if you're looking for voiceovers, you can get in touch with me about that too. Now, back to the podcast. So we're getting towards the end of things here, but I do want to ask what you're working on now. What are you up to at this moment?
A couple of things. One is some new launches with podcasts. One I'm excited about is we're working with an investment bank, which is a very dry subject, but they're doing a really cool podcast. They're an Indian bank, and they're doing a podcast called The Story of India.
Oh,
which is really awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's in the context of investment as opposed to like going deep into Hollywood and all the, the food and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I really like that because I think, storytelling should always be about reframing narratives. And if you think storytelling can be positive and negative, you can change the way people see things, events, history, other people in a positive way. And India has a very strong narrative, which is not all positive about what it is. And so they're creating this story to retell India on India's terms, which is awesome. And they've got some great people, like some people from cricket and Bollywood and business leaders. And somebody who took Wendy's burger franchise to India and took pizzas to India. It's like unthinkable. Like taking Italian pizzas to India and selling them to the middle class. So all these amazing stories. So I'm really excited about that. That's coming out soon. More of that. I've got a couple more projects that are launching around these themes where I'm really looking forward to the projects where we're doing corporate storytelling, but much more immersive. It's not going to be Wondery style, but it's going to be a lot more interesting than, man speaking to man type podcast, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm working on. The other thing is working on helping people guest on other people's podcasts. Because I've realized there's a lot of people who love podcasts, but actually a lot of them, when they get down to it, realize it's hard work.
It is.
Yeah, as you know.
I'm doing a lot more myself. Yeah. It's hard work.
It is hard work. Let's face it, guys. It's not as easy as it sounds. So for that group of people, we found that actually they wanted to get on podcasts, but not their own. So I found that there was a market of people there and helping people doing that and guesting. And it's a lot of fun because they can find ready-made audiences. They can, now with those 3 million podcasts, there's a podcast about everything now.
So true.
If not 100 of them, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So, like a few years ago, you couldn't find your niche covered. But now there's everything out there, which is, and it's not just everything. It's like lots of different levels of podcasts as well.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. And I think that's going to be a growth area because, that is how people are now looking for ways to get out there in the absence of events and all those things we talked about, the PR and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Podcasts are definitely a way to do that, and you have a ready-made audience. It's just sitting there.
Audience growth is really hard, isn't it? That's the point.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think the production part's actually quite straightforward on a podcast, but growing an audience is really hard and getting harder.
And it takes a long time. It can take a long time.
Well, you're thinking about what the audience wants, right? That's important.
Yeah, that is.
That, not just in terms of timing, but also content and the guests and so on.
Yeah.
Which is really important. They're everything now.
They totally are. Yeah. And them sharing it with people who might enjoy it as well is also really important. But getting on other podcasts, yeah, I can see how that would help grow an audience for another podcast, because
Absolutely.
you go on, you go on other podcasts and you mention yours.
3, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a great way to do it. Yeah. So how can people find you? What would be the best way for them to find you and learn more about you and reach out?
My website is the easiest place. So that's all the W's, grahamdbrown.com.
Wonderful. Okay. And I will have all of this in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I loved this conversation. It got a lot deeper than I thought it would, but I love that.
Did it?
Oh, no, I love it. No, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it a lot.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun. It's good. And I really like what you're doing as well. You've really identified your niche.
Thanks.
Being the X guy, you're always like that corner of somebody's mind that you occupy. Like you're the audio branding guy. And I say guy in the generic guy sense.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I think that's really important.
Sure. Yeah.
That is really, that's the valuable thing now, to be recognized for one thing.
Sure.
Even if it's a small thing in people's consciousness, that's really valuable.
Well, if I can help raise consciousness about how important sound is for all sorts of things, then that's what I'm trying to do. That's my why.
Yeah, well, totally. It's your passion as well. And, it sort of, resonates with the DNA, and you're talking about audio and audio branding. You're not venturing out into all different aspects of branding as well. You're staying focused on.
No, I am venturing out into all other aspects of sound.
Yeah.
But audio branding specifically, and how our buying habits are influenced by sound, is a big part of that. So yeah,
that's cool.
But yeah, I'm having fun, and I hope you had fun too. And
I did.
I look forward
very much
to
so.
Great. I look forward to future conversations.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.